Welcome to our first lecture. So this lecture is going to be sort of an orienting lecture, and we're going to talk about what is play. So we're going to be defining generally what play consists of, and that will give us a good foundation to move forward for the rest of the class. To start us out, let's do a little brainstorming. So if you take out your phone and use this QR code, you will be taken to a Padlet. I don't know if you've used a Padlet before in other classes, but it's basically just like a big whiteboard, a place where you can create little digital post-it notes and put them on a board. So when you open up the Padlet, there is a plus sign to the left-hand side of the screen, and you click on that plus sign, and then that will open a post-it note that you can put down your ideas about what play is all about. And as people add to it, you'll be able to see their ideas as well. So this is a group Padlet where we can all work together and create some conversation about what we think play is. In a minute, I'm going to start talking about some definitions of play and also definitions of work, because oftentimes we see play and work as two opposite ends of a continuum, so diametrically opposed to each other. Play is something and work is something else, and play is something we like and work is something that we don't like. But before we get into those slides defining what play and work are, I would encourage you to take a look at this article by NAEYC. So NAEYC is the National Association for the Education of Young Children, and they are the preeminent professional organization in the field of early childhood education. They cover ages 0 to 8, so the ages that we're covering in this class. And this is a good get you started article that gives you some ideas about what play is. So let's talk about what play is first, and then we'll switch over to work. So here, the definition of play isn't 100% agreed upon. Different scholars have different ideas, different theorists have different ideas, but the items listed on this slide tend to be pretty commonly accepted by folks with knowledge of early childhood education, so experts in the field. These are basic things that most people agree on sort of fit the definition of play. So first of all, play is something that you choose to do. It's not something that is chosen for you. So you may enjoy doing an activity, but maybe you didn't personally choose it. So maybe you like to read, but when you're at school, a teacher tells you it's time to read. So yes, you enjoy reading, but it didn't mean that you freely chose to read. If you have a whole classroom of things that you can do, and you decide to walk over to the book area and get a book and read, that's intrinsically motivated. That's something that you chose to do. You chose it because you inherently like reading. It's something that gives you pleasure internally, not something that someone is telling you to do, not something that someone's going to give you a reward for, or to check off, yay, you did the reading for the day. So intrinsically motivated is it gives me personal pleasure. It makes me feel good inside. I don't have to get a reward for doing it. I don't have to have anybody check off that I accomplished that task. It's just something that I like to do just for myself. And I freely chose it all by myself. Nobody told me to do it. Nobody gave me a reward for doing it. I chose it because I enjoy it and I want to do it. So that's the first two. Intrinsically motivating, liking something, choosing it because it gives you personal pleasure, and freely choosing it on your own. So typically when we're talking about play also, we recognize that when people are playing, that they generally have positive emotions that are being experienced at that time. So if you look at the picture to the left of this slide, you can see the girl is smiling. You can see the boy at least looks pleased with what he's doing. So I don't see any negative affect or upset on the faces of either of the children. There's definitely a positive mood going on typically when people are playing. So the next two are a little bit hard to understand sometimes, but let's try the non-literal one first. So when we're playing, sometimes it's non-literal because we're actually pretending. So literal means like real, now, tangible, the real life thing, whereas non-literal means pretend, fantasy, creating, being swept up by your imagination. So generally when we're playing, we're in some sort of kind of fantasy, imaginative, dramatic play, non-literal world. It kind of takes me away from the here and now. So I don't know about the rest of you. I really like to read. So reading for me is intrinsically motivated. I will happily pick up a book on my own. I freely choose to read. I have positive feelings when I'm reading. And I really do get swept up in the story. It really takes me away from the here and now. And if it's a good book in particular, I get sucked in deep to that make-believe fantasy world. And that's what play generally is all about, is children get sucked up into that fantasy world away from the here and now, giving flights of fancy and imagination and using all their creativity. So unconstrained. So unconstrained is about rules. And it's easy to think, oh, there aren't any rules in play. You can do whatever you want. And that's not really the case. So what unconstrained means is that rules aren't set up by some outside entity. So again, if we go back to that kid, even if they like reading, if they were told that it's reading time at school, well, typically the teacher will say, here's how much you have to read, here's how long you have to read, here's what you have to do when you're reading. So that outside person is the one who is setting those rules for reading. Whereas when kids are playing, there might be rules, but they're established not by some outside entity. They're established by the players themselves. So, for example, if children are in dramatic play, if you want to have a dramatic play scenario where you're pretending to be a mom and a baby, the mom kind of has to stay in character. It's sort of understood that you have to be the mom. And if you're the baby, you have to be the baby. So it's not a rule where an adult came over and said, okay, you guys are going to play mom and baby, and here's what the mom has to do, and here's what the baby has to do. It's children themselves creating the rules. And children might even say, don't talk in your regular voice. You're supposed to be a baby. Moms don't do that. Moms do this. So there are rules, but they're created by the players themselves. So they are unconstrained by some sort of outside entity. So another thing that we know about play is that there's an emphasis on process. What you are doing is more important than what the final outcome is. So the process of playing, the joy that comes from just doing without necessarily having to have some sort of end goal, is a focus on process. So those children building that dirt hill, the building of the dirt hill is more important than what it turns out to be at the end. They're not trying necessarily to achieve some preset standard or some preset kind of hill. They're just playing and enjoying. They're just deep down in the process of what they're doing. And finally, typically in play, children are actively engaged with their whole minds and their whole bodies. So it's not, oh, I'm just doing this with my hands, but my mind has drifted away somewhere else because what I'm doing is so boring. It is all consuming. It takes all of your concentration and your energy and your physicality and your social skills. You are actively 100% engaged with the task at hand. So those are key components of what play looks like when people are engaging in it, either children or adults. So I didn't create a Padlet for this one, and you can either go back to the Padlet that you were already using when you were brainstorming about what is play, so you can add in some post-it notes about what you think work is, or you can just brainstorm on your own. But before we get to the official list of what work consists of, think about that definition of play and think about sort of what the opposite of each of those points is. So if we say that play is process, what would work be? If we say that play is unconstrained, what would work be? So try and think about sort of what is not play, and that is likely work. There's also this kind of official definition. So work is the physical or mental effort or activity directed towards the production or accomplishment of something. So already we're seeing that it's probably not about process. It's probably not about just going out there and digging whatever. You're digging to achieve some sort of aim. So these kids here, they are creating the rows to be able to plant something. So somebody didn't tell them, oh, head on out there and just dig and have fun. They said, this is what we want this to look like at the end, and we expect you to accomplish this particular thing when the task is over. So just a little brainstorming time, and then we'll get into the next slide. So as you can see on this slide, we have the opposite. So we have all of those things that we used when we were defining play, but we have the opposite of each one of those. So rather than being intrinsically motivated, something that is pleasurable, that you enjoy just because you enjoy it, this would be extrinsically motivated. So this is something that you do because somebody is going to basically generally give you something at the end, either give you a reward or give you a punishment. So when my son was little, he did not like taking a medicine that he needed to take, and we needed to use extrinsic motivators. We needed to give him rewards every few days when he took the medicine like he was supposed to. Or a child does not do something that you want them to do. Maybe they did not finish their work in class and you say you have to stay in and you don't get to go to recess. So children are doing the work, but they're not internally motivated. It's not something that they enjoy just because they enjoy it. They're doing it because they either want to get the goodies or they want to avoid being in trouble. Oftentimes work is chosen by others. So when you go to work, typically you're not saying, hey, I'm here and I've decided that I'm going to do this today. Generally, when you go to work, your boss says, this is what I need you to do today, and these are the tasks that you're supposed to accomplish, and you may enjoy them. They may have some pleasure to them, but you didn't personally choose them. They were chosen by someone else. And as teachers, we often choose things, even if they're fun activities, we choose them for children so they can be pleasurable activities, but it doesn't mean that they meet the definition of play. So you might have a range of affect. So remember we were saying for play that there's typically positive affect, happy feelings, contented feelings, satisfied feelings. So play or work can have kind of all different feelings. You might have positive feelings while you're working. You might have neutral feelings, so you're not feeling happy or sad or upset or pleased. You're just, you're there. And you may actively dislike what you're doing. You may have negative feelings while you're there. You may have unhappy feelings while you're there. So it kind of depends on what work you're doing. And, some kids like school, some don't. Some like the jobs they have, some don't. So it could be a variety of different types of affect that are happening. So another thing is that it's literal. So we talked before about play being non-literal, being flights of fancy and imagination and creativity and pretend play and all the good stuff. Literal is here and now. Like you're not off some mental place that is, you're not playing make-believe. You're not using your imagination necessarily. I mean, you might be in your job. Some people do have jobs where they get to use creativity. But typically you're much more in the here and now because the work is constrained. It's chosen by others. There's rules created by others. There's a product that you're supposed to create at the end. So you may have less opportunity to be removed from the here and now. So work tends to be much more literal. And again, I was already starting to talk about it tends to be constrained. So there are parameters in how you have to do the work, how much time you have to do the work, how much you can spend on the work, what you're supposed to produce from the work. It's generally not open to the players themselves getting to create the rules. The rules are created by someone other than yourself or the players in the process. And it's much less about process. It's almost always about achieving some sort of product at the end. because that's kind of the nature of work. Finally, work tends to be kind of rote tasks. So it's not sort of the enthusiasm of getting to be creative and figure out what you want to do. It's things that you don't really have to have all of your mental and physical energy go to. So I don't know about you, but there's a lot of things that I can do without really mentally being too invested at all. I can clean my whole house and not be thinking about really cleaning the house at all. I'm thinking about all kinds of other things. I, sometimes when I'm at work, the things I'm doing are boring. And so, yes, I'm doing them, but I'm not giving them my whole effort, attention, mental energy. So it's not my whole self that it's involved. It's part of myself. It's doing something because I've done it a million times before, and I already know what I need to be doing, and therefore I don't have to devote all of my mental energy to that task. So those are the defining characteristics of work. So even though I've made it seem kind of simple, and I've made it seem like work and play are opposite ends of the continuum, that they don't have any overlap with one another, it is more complicated than that. And there are elements of play that involve work, and there's elements of work that involve play. And so it really is more of a continuum. So on our next slide, I'm going to be talking a little bit about that sort of continuum idea and how there's kind of a space in the middle between play work that we can call play work. So we have play at one end, we have work at the other end, and we kind of have this play work thing in the middle. But before we do that, I'd like you to watch this TED Talk. It's by a gentleman named Dan Pink. And what he's really getting at is that in our modern society, and if we want to have work that works, that gets us where we need to be, we really need to figure out how to bring play and work together and have more in common with one another, and that we need to stop just teaching people how to be rote, product-oriented workers and how to infuse more play in our work and infuse maybe a little bit of work in our play. But it's an interesting video, so please start there and then you can move to the next slide. All right, finally thinking about this play-work continuum and thinking about how these principles aren't polar opposites from one another, that there's probably many of the tasks that we do in our daily lives are somewhere in the middle. They're not completely one end or the other. So I'm going to use my own job as an example. I have mentioned that I am a part-time instructor at Crafton, and I am a full-time faculty member at Cal State San Bernardino. And yes, I have a job. There are things sometimes that I have to do in that job that I don't particularly enjoy, but there's a lot of freedom that I have in my job, especially when I'm teaching classes. I get to decide what content I want to teach. I get to decide how I'm going to teach that content. I get to decide what my PowerPoint slides are going to look like and what exactly I'm going to say to you when I get there. So I actually have a fair amount of ability to be playful in the work that I'm creating. And there's not always a set agenda for what I'm supposed to produce. So I'm going to just take creating PowerPoints as an example. I really like creating PowerPoints. So yes, I have to create PowerPoints because I need to show up with something to teach you with, but I'm intrinsically motivated to spend a lot of time creating PowerPoints and looking up information and thinking about how to best present that information. So I honestly get a lot of personal pleasure, and I would freely choose to do this with my time. This is a part of my job that I never have to force myself to do, even though I know that it is, I'll get in trouble if I don't come with a PowerPoint, and my bosses say I have to have something to show up and teach you with. There's a lot that is intrinsically motivating and freely chosen for me. I also find it fun. I don't find it boring. I don't know that it's pretend play in sort of the traditional sense of the word, but I, spend a lot of time thinking about like how I can be creative with what I'm doing and how I can tell a story, how I can not make it so literal and boring, but how I can make it more interesting. There's nobody telling me exactly how to do it, so it's not constrained by any outside rules other than the limits of what PowerPoint can do. So, I have a fair amount of, I get to determine the rules and I get to determine how I would like my classes to go. Even though I am creating a product, I'm very invested in the process, and I spend a lot of time in the process, not really worrying so much about what the product is going to be, even though there is one at the end. And I am generally very actively engaged when I'm doing this. This is not one of those tasks that I'm just doing but not really paying attention to. I am completely mentally engaged. I should probably find some things to do that get me more physically engaged, but the things that need to be activated are activated when I'm working on this. So, I just really want you to think about because oftentimes educational environments fall so heavily on the work end, and we're forgetting to allow children the opportunities to be playful in the things that they're learning and to be playful in the experiences that we're providing them in school. We're so focused on the work half of the continuum that we're forgetting about the play half of the continuum and trying to find some sort of middle ground. So I'm really hoping that in our next upcoming lectures, you can see the benefits of allowing children the opportunity to play, or at minimum to be somewhere in the middle on this play work continuum so that they can gain all the important developmental benefits that play has to offer.